Tzav as a Parsha from the get-go was something that, I struggled with a little bit because, number one, I don't like being told what to do. Maybe I have a little problem with authority, epis. So, from the first word, it didn't stem for me so well. But then I took a moment to look through it a little bit more, and I think there's a lot of maybe cool stuff if you zoom out to see, and a little bit to help us prep for Pesach as well. So when you're doing something, you've got to pay attention to the details. You cross your I's, you dot your T's, vice versa. But the Parsha has a lot of good T's. Okay, we won't go there, but it has a lot of good stuff in the Parsha. The Parsha starts off with an Eish Tamid, so you always have to have the fire burning. Then it goes through a whole bunch of Torahs, Zot Torat, and it talks about all of the different korbanos that it has. One of the last korbanot that it brings down is a korban toda, a gratitude offering. And then the Parsha ends with Lo Tetzu. How did Aaron do the inauguration? Him and his family, they didn't leave the Mishkan for 7 days. So there's a whole bunch of these different T's that we can try and tease out now for a little bit. As I learned this morning, Tzav is something that it's a commandment, and it gives us, I think the Kli Yakar says it, that it makes it a commandment that is for generations. Rashi says that it's a commandment for generations. There's others that bring down that it also, when do you need to be told to do something? When it feels like you don't want to do it, right? It's not something that's a simple action for you to automatically do. And if you think about this Parsha in the context of where it sits between last week and this week, this is the echo from last week's Parsha where we learned about all the rulings of the Korbanot, and in this week, Aaron and his sons start to do them. So we shift from the plan to putting it into practice. And there's, maybe just to zoom out for a second, this week's Parsha is about that shift from Moshe telling all of these things to the actual putting them into practice. And there's a shift that we have here from the idea of the prophet to the idea of the priest. In the prophet, we talk about all kinds of divine wisdoms. We talk about, guidance from God. I feel this. I can do it on my own. The priest is about putting it into service. He brings it down. He does it on a regular basis. He's going to consistently do this. And the shift from that divine wisdom to this week in the Parsha is of putting it into practice is really, I think, it's the challenge. The Parsha even echoes this in the way that it brings the shalsheles. It's a very rare trup, a lot of crying involved in it, but it's this shalsheles is brought down, I think, at the end of the Parsha on the word vayishchat. The literal act of doing the service is a tension between this idea of I'm divinely inspired. I do things when I feel like it to putting them into practice on a regular basis. So what's the challenge of an Eish Tamid? We go back to the beginning. Last week we talked a little about the melach and the salt. Maybe I'm still salty, but when you start to do something over and over again is when it gets hard. It's mundane epis, and you kind of need to shift into a place where you have a plan. That the way that it's described as Eish Tamid is that the light existed 24 hours. So that meant that in order to keep this thing going, they had to plan. The Kohanim were there, they left, they set up wood. There was a way that they worked to make sure that this was going to be consistent. At the same time, maybe Tamid is something that feels a little bit like it's scary. You're going to keep doing the same thing for forever. So the Torah gives us another couple of things to think about. It gives us the Zot Torat, and it talks there about for each one of the kinds of korbanot, it brings down a new explanation of it, so to speak. And it brings down sort of a way to understand where you're starting from. It brings down these different korbanot. So you have the Ola, where you're feeling spiritual, you're kind of already on a good plane. You have the Chatas, the shlamim. You have all these different kinds of korbanos, and in a way, they give us an understanding of where we are when we start to take action. So if you're feeling righteous, that's one place that you can start from. If you're feeling like a sinner, maybe you have the chatas, it's another place you can start from. If you're feeling guilty, um, uh, each one of them has their own way of understanding kind of where we are. Each one of them, though, is a korban that I can bring, a way of expressing my connection with coming close to God, and maybe it's also a way for us to metaphorically understand how we can connect with people around us. And the last of the korbanot is, I guess, is the interesting one. It's the korban toda. It's the korban of thanksgiving. So we have such a concept in Judaism too, korban of gratitude. But what do we learn from this korban of toda? So firstly, it's considered either it's considered part of, or it's written next to shlamim, because that's a way that a person becomes whole again through gratitude. They talk about it a lot in psychological sense when a person is trying to feel more self-efficacy and happiness, that gratitude is a very powerful practice. Even when you're thinking about things, they say when you're journaling, if you have a full debrief of how depressing your day was and you put in one small piece of gratitude, it can help shift the perspective of a person as well. So we know gratitude, hoda, is a powerful thing, but at the same time, we can find a way maybe to connect it now to what's coming up in a couple of weeks with Pesach. So this parsha also talks about the idea of nosar. So how does one do gratitude? How does one do a toda? We have to do it in a way that we don't have nosar. So timing with gratitude is important. It's important to kind of find when you see something that you are appreciative of, that you step up and you say that. It's sometimes, I would say also it's sort of a challenging catch-22, because you could do gratitude and it feels like you could do performative kinds of gratitude. I go through the motions with it. It is an action of showing toda, and then at the same time there's sort of the moment of recognizing that now is the time to do it, right? And a toda has a time, but a toda is also a korban that I do regardless of whether I feel all the feelings of gratitude. So sometimes somebody does something nice for you, you don't necessarily feel the gratitude that you want, but it's the echo of the kind gesture that somebody did for you. And maybe just to end, the parsha says lo tetzu. This is the Yemei Miluim, again another language of Malay, a language of fullness. Its stuff got 7 days, and kind of in an echo to Zman Bereshis, the creation at the beginning. But I guess the challenge here is lo tetzu. Now that the Rashi brings down that when Aaron did it, Vayas Aaron and his sons, it says that he did it even though he was told to do all this stuff by Moshe. He did it with the full joy, as if he heard it directly from God. But I think lo tetzu is maybe a different kind of a challenge to us, because practice, we say practice makes perfect. Not so much. Practice, I mean, it's not a romantic concept. It works. But why does it work? Because practice makes permanent. It's the repetition of actions that brings things in a way into our lives with more permanence. And that's really, I think, is the guidance for the time when we shift from divine and inspired to a more mundane time. Is you set a window, and you work the system in a way. We find time to say that for the next 7 days I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and then I'll check in afterwards and reflect after, and see how we can sort of re-inspire. But that's really I think the closing guidance of the parsha is to try and find that way, that understanding that we're going to make that shift. There are going to be times when we're feeling that and inspired selves, and then there are times when we're just sort of continuing, and that understanding where we start is an important frame, and using gratitude can be a really powerful equalizer, but there will always be that tension that we have when we make that shift from divine to mundane. So, Azoi.